upon further reflection on this gospel message, I have to wonder, Epiphany is the revelation of Jesus to the Gentiles. And who were the first Gentiles that actually saw Jesus? Well, we have them right here in this part of our story. The wise men from the east. We're not exactly sure how far east. But obviously they knew the language, otherwise they wouldn't be in the streets asking people, going from person to person, have you seen the child that we heard about? Have you seen the child? Where's the king? Where's the child? Which is interesting. I imagine they stood out because of their accents, because of their dress, maybe because of their looks even. And I find it interesting that none of the people said, King of the Jews. Well, that's Herod. No, nobody said that. Herod was no friend of theirs. We find from the readings from a couple months ago, we talked about Pilate and how cruel and ruthless he was. Well, finding out that Herod is pretty much in the same boat. He was really not Jewish by birth. He was appointed by the Roman government. Actually, anybody who came up against him was killed. Even one of his 10 wives he killed. 3 of his sons he killed. This is a ruthless guy. And so they have no predilection to serve him or to consider him king of the Jews. They had their prophets, they had their prophecies, and I think, from what I can tell, this is probably the first they've heard from these wise men inquiring. I imagine after the wise men asked him about the king who was born, they went among themselves and said, did you hear what they said? Could it be true? I mean, it probably went like wildfire throughout the city. That these 3 foreigners were looking for the Christ. It must be true. The prophecies must be true. And so one of the first witnesses to the birth of the child were actually Gentiles. Interestingly enough. I find that fascinating. And also they were of the thought they were probably a different religion altogether. And I find it interesting that they would come from a far distance to pay homage to this baby, this one they've heard about. The star they saw had to be important for them to follow and bring riches, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Gifts for royalty, for a king. When in fact Mary and Joseph had nothing to give in return. It was simply a gift. And so we have this snippet of the wise men, the astrologers, the magi, whomever you want to call them. They were the ones with nothing to lose. They had, upon this birth of this child, for them it was a gain only, celebration. Let's see what happens now. Let's pay close attention to what this child does and how this child grows up. Unlike Herod, who had everything to lose, and he knew it. And knowing Herod, he made sure that anybody who stood in his rule or even attempted to usurp his rule were killed. And he made sure of that. And as we know later on, that he made sure the kids under 2 were all in Bethlehem were gone, slaughtered, killed, because they were a threat to him. And his power, for him power was to be maintained at all costs. And it wasn't his. The rightful heir to the throne was the descendant of David, Jesus. And as we find later that Jesus doesn't take the kingly throne from anybody. His is a different rule. His is a different governing. His is a different altogether rule for him. A different kind. His power was to be given away, and given away freely. Obviously, he gave all his power away so that he could be killed and crucified by people that he could have easily crushed. By a simple prayer, who knows how that would happen. We see a man, Herod, who holds tightly to his rule by any cost, by any means. And we see Jesus, who is the rightful king, the rightful heir, giving away power, giving away whatever he has for the benefit of the people, so that they could prosper, so they could truly live. And we know that it's just part of our nature, too, is once we have power to hold on to it at any cost. And we've seen that through centuries and generations. We see that in the world today, the people that are coming into power, some are just not good people at all. And and amidst that, there are good people, good rulers throughout the world as well. And if we know our history, that the Judah has been ruled by good kings and bad kings. So that's just the way it is. The Epiphany is that the Gentiles, the first non-Jews to see and witness the child, made big news of it. They got the rumors started. They got the body of people percolating with questions, with a sense to see what happens, and he makes, and just the presence of this child makes the people in power nervous. Why? It wasn't his intention to take over. It was his intention to help and heal a wounded world, to bring people so that they had enough to eat, to sleep under a roof, to have whatever they needed to thrive. And for Herod, that was scary. We fall into some of those things that rulers do. And we constantly need the hand of Jesus to forgive us, to heal us. We find that we put ourselves at our center of our universe and build walls around us so that we protect ourselves. And sometimes rightly so, we should. But also to have the sense of being vulnerable to people that can help us, that can influence us, that we can care for, that can care for us in return. The Magi from the East, I imagine, went back to their world, to their home country, and professed what they had seen and what they had heard and all these kinds of things. And to be influenced by angels, not to go back to Herod because he had an evil plot for Jesus. So they had their part to play as well in this. But their stories were coming true. The people they talked to on the streets, their stories were coming true. This king, this baby, this ruler, the Son of God who has come and healed the world has come amongst them as a baby, unexpectedly, for a 14-year-old girl and a young man not married to her in Bethlehem, the city of David. Humble beginnings for such power to be given freely to the world. Power to help, power to heal, power to be present. Then and now. Maybe in some ways not as tangible as they saw, as they felt, but tangible nonetheless in our hearts. We know, we've felt, we've seen. Epiphany, the revelation of Jesus to the Gentiles. What an eye-opening event. Amen.